"Get out of here." The scream cracked through the marble hall like a whip. Every crystal glass froze mid-air. Guests in silk and sequins turned their heads toward the sound. A white-haired matriarch in emerald green, her hand still trembling from the slap she'd just delivered. And across from her, Amara Cole didn't move. The imprint of the strike glowed faintly against her dark skin, but her eyes never flinched. For a heartbeat, the entire gala fell silent. Only the echo of that palm against her cheek seemed to linger beneath the vaulted ceiling of the museum ballroom. Phones lifted. Gasps rippled. Someone whispered, "Did she just—" "Security," the older woman barked. "This imposter doesn't belong here." Guests shifted uneasily, torn between curiosity and fear of proximity. A violinist near the stage stopped mid-note. The conductor lowered his bow. Amara stood in her deep sapphire gown, no jewelry, no entourage, just poise carved from steel. Her expression, calm, unreadable, the kind that unnerves those who expect submission. Behind the shocked crowd, a young journalist mouthed to her friend, "Wait, isn't that the Cole woman, the billionaire?" Her companion shook her head, recording anyway. Amara's breathing stayed measured. One hand grazed her cheek, not to soothe it, to remember. The matriarch sneered, "You think you can sneak into a Bennett event dressed like that? Who even invited you?" No answer. Just the hum of humiliation filling the air. From the corner, a young waiter froze, recognition flickering in his eyes. He whispered, "That's her, the one funding the merger." But it was too late. The insult had already detonated. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Amara. The woman in green stepped closer, her pearls rattling with fury. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Amara lifted her gaze, steady as glass. "You don't belong here," the woman hissed. "People like you," Amara interrupted softly, "are usually the reason places like this exist." A collective breath caught. The matriarch blinked, startled by the calm. Her voice rose again, brittle with rage. "Get her out, now." No one moved. Because in that instant, before anyone understood who stood before them, something in Amara's stillness shifted the air itself. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shock. It was control. She exhaled slowly, almost a whisper, yet every ear caught it. "This will be the most expensive slap of your life." The crowd didn't know what that meant yet, but in less than a minute, they would. 10 minutes earlier, no one had noticed her walk in. The gala had been in full bloom, champagne laughter, string quartet trembling through the museum's marble corridors, men in tuxedos discussing market futures they didn't understand. Beneath the grand archway, Amara Cole appeared like a quiet question in a room full of noise. No red carpet, no spotlight, just a deep sapphire gown that caught the light like the surface of calm water. Her heels clicked softly against the floor, each step measured, deliberate. Heads turned briefly, then dismissed her. Too young, too plain, too black for the guest list. She smiled, not for them, but for herself, because tonight was a test. 2 years earlier, she had acquired Cole Capital Holdings, turning it into one of the fastest-growing private equity firms in New York. A month ago, her company had saved the Bennett Group from bankruptcy, signing a preliminary deal worth $1.5 billion. Tonight was supposed to celebrate that partnership. Instead, it would expose what money could never buy: grace. At the registration table, an usher blinked at her name tag. "Miss Cole, I don't see your table assignment." "That's all right," she said calmly. "I'll find my seat." He hesitated, half raising a hand to stop her, but her voice carried quiet authority, a tone people obeyed before realizing why. Inside, under a halo of chandeliers, Amara moved like she belonged to the space because she did, yet whispers followed like perfume. Who invited her? She must be part of the staff. Security should check credentials. Amara heard them all, stored each comment like evidence. At the champagne bar, a man with a silver beard smiled condescendingly. "Lovely event, isn't it? They let in all kinds these days." Amara turned, her expression serene. "That's the beauty of evolution, isn't it?" she replied. Even the gates are learning to open. He didn't understand it was an answer. Across the room, the Bennett family stood near the art installation, patriarch in navy suit, matriarch in emerald green, their son adjusting his cufflinks with the casual arrogance of inherited wealth. Cameras circled them like planets around the sun. Amara approached slowly, not to greet, not to boast, simply to exist within the same air that once excluded her. Her assistant Carla had warned her hours before, "You don't owe them attendance." "I'm not attending," Amara had replied. "I'm observing." And she did every smirk, every glance that said, "You don't belong." A young black server caught her eye, nodding subtly in recognition, the only other dark face in a sea of porcelain. Amara offered a small nod back, a silent alliance between the unseen. The orchestra swelled. The Bennetts raised their glasses for the opening toast. "To partnership," Mr. Bennett declared, "and to preserving legacy." Amara's lips curved faintly. Legacy, the word always sounded noble when spoken by those afraid to share it. She stepped closer, within 3 meters of the family now. Conversations dimmed as the matriarch noticed her. The older woman's smile faltered. She leaned to her husband, whispering, "Who let her in?" Amara stopped at the edge of the crowd, near a marble statue of Athena wisdom, carved in stone. She lifted a glass of water, not champagne, watched, waited. The matriarch turned fully toward her, mask of charm slipping into suspicion. And in that suspended breath before confrontation, Amara Cole, billionaire, reformer, and the only person in the room with true power, looked almost invisible, exactly as she intended. The gala was a symphony of ego gold chandeliers burning low, laughter sharp as glass, deals being whispered over foie gras and fake affection. And somewhere, amid the glittering noise, a silence began to form around one woman in blue, Amara Cole. She stood near a marble column, sipping water while every other guest clinked champagne. Her calm didn't fit the room. It unsettled people who mistook loudness for importance. From across the hall, Mrs. Bennett watched her like a stain on perfection. She leaned toward a friend in yellow silk. "You see her? No escort, no name tag. Probably one of the staff who slipped in for photos. Is Nate." Her friend smirked. "She carries herself differently, though. Confidence and arrogance are cousins," Mrs. Bennett replied, "and I know which one that is." Laughter followed, quiet, poisonous, meant to be heard. A waiter passed, tray trembling slightly. Amara caught his unease, smiled softly. "Thank you." He nodded. "Ma'am, you look familiar." "Do I?" she said, eyes on the swirling crowd. "Maybe from the papers." Before he could answer, a man in a burgundy suit intercepted. "Excuse me, this area's for board members only." Amara's gaze lifted. "Steady. And you are?" "Logan Pierce, Bennett Group CFO." "Then we've exchanged emails," she said. He frowned, searching memory he didn't have. "About what?" "The acquisition you're about to toast." He laughed nervously. Right. Of course." Then quieter. "Still, this section is private." "Of course," she repeated. "Privacy is for those with something to hide." He blinked. She turned away. Nearby, the Bennetts posed for a photographer. The flash painted their smiles bright and hollow. Mr. Bennett's voice boomed. "Legacy, family, integrity." The crowd applauded like an obedient choir. Mrs. Bennett spotted Amara again. "Why is she still here?" she muttered. "Thomas, tell security to check her credentials." Her husband waved her off. "Not now. She's harmless." Harmless, the word women like her had heard their whole lives, right before proving otherwise. At that same moment, a whisper rippled through the room. A young journalist recognized Amara. She typed quickly into her phone. "Is that Amara Cole? The Cole Capital CEO?" The message darted through group chats faster than champagne could pour. Across the room, Amara stood by a marble bust of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, a symbol of quiet authority she'd always admired. She traced the rim of her glass, feeling the chill of the crystal. She remembered another room, another crowd, 26 years old, fresh from her first acquisition meeting, told she was too composed to be credible. The same tone, the same eyes measuring her worth by skin and silence. The past never died, it recycled. "Excuse me," Mrs. Bennet said finally, crossing the floor. Her pearls clicked like punctuation marks. "I'm sorry, but I must ask who you're here with." Amara turned slowly, eyes soft but unflinching. "With? Yes, guests of the Bennets only." End quote. "I suppose that makes us connected," Amara said. "The Bennets and I go way back." Mrs. Bennet frowned. "I don't recall your name." "You will," Amara replied. The tension thickened. Conversations faltered. People sensed something brewing, a shift in temperature only arrogance fails to detect. Mrs. Bennet's smile hardened. "I'm sure it's a misunderstanding." Amara nodded lightly. "Most prejudice is." The orchestra's final note hung in the air, fragile as breath. And just as it faded, Mrs. Bennet took one step too close. Her tone dropped from polite to poisonous. "I don't know how you got in here," she hissed, "but it won't happen again." Amara's reply was a whisper wrapped in steel. It already did. And with that, the night tilted softly, imperceptibly toward chaos. The moment the matriarch's voice rose, the atmosphere in the marble hall began to shift. Conversations stuttered, violins fell silent mid-measure. All eyes turned toward the confrontation, one older woman wrapped in entitlement, one younger woman wrapped in restraint. Mrs. Bennet's words sliced through the hush. "You're in the wrong place, sweetheart. Step away before I have you escorted out." Amara didn't answer. She simply lowered her glass and met her gaze. The stillness was electric, like the second before a storm splits the air. The young server from earlier, still clutching his tray, froze a few feet away. He knew that face. He'd seen it once on a finance magazine cover his sister had taped above their kitchen table. Amara Cole, the billionaire who buys back power. His throat tightened. "That's her," he whispered to no one in particular. But someone heard a young journalist in a lavender dress, phone in hand. Her name was Lena Morales, a freelancer chasing stories about hypocrisy in high places. She followed the whisper, her camera already recording. The little red light blinked like a pulse. Mrs. Bennet noticed the attention and turned sharper, her voice carrying for everyone to hear. "Don't make a scene. We run respectable events here. Do you?" Amara's voice was low, steady, "Because this one feels educational." Gasps fluttered like birds. A few guests glanced at each other, unsure whether to intervene or step away. The instinct for self-preservation was stronger than the instinct for justice. At the edge of the crowd, the Bennet son Alexander looked uneasy. He recognized the name now, faintly. Cole Capital, the company wiring their rescue funds next week. "Mother," he said quietly, "maybe she's—" "Not now," she snapped. "Handle your wine, not my guest list." The older man beside her, Mr. Bennet, remained stoic, clutching his glass, pretending not to hear. That silence was its own violence. Lena's camera caught it all. The arrogance, the imbalance, the symmetry of humiliation. Behind her, murmurs began. Someone said, "Wait. That is her. She owns half the board." Another voice, lower. "If that's true, they're done." The server stepped forward, trembling. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I think there's been a mistake." Mrs. Bennet spun. "You will not speak unless spoken to. Go back to your post." He didn't move. His eyes darted to Amara's, silently apologizing for the world they both understood too well. Amara gave him the smallest nod, a permission, a gratitude, a shield. "You're defending her?" Mrs. Bennet's laugh was brittle. "How noble. But this isn't a protest, darling. It's a gala. Know your place." "I do," Amara said quietly. "Do you?" That line landed like a gavel. Even the chandeliers seemed to listen. Lena zoomed in. Her hands shook, but she kept filming. She'd covered political scandals and celebrity downfalls, but never something that felt this alive, this true. From the far side of the hall, a pianist tried to fill the silence with polite melody. It only made the tension louder. Alexander took a hesitant step forward again. "Mother, I think." Mrs. Bennet held up a hand. "Security." The word broke the spell. Two men in black suits began walking from the corridor, confusion already written on their faces. And that's when Lena whispered to her phone's mic, "We're watching history repeat itself, arrogance, about to meet consequence." Amara turned slightly, her gaze finding the lens. For the first time, she spoke not to Mrs. Bennet, not to the guests, but to whoever might one day watch. "Let them see," she said softly. The journalist's hand tightened around the phone. The crowd didn't understand the weight of those 3 words. But in that instant, the witness was no longer a bystander. She was a record, and the world was about to replay every second of it. The sound came first, a sharp crack echoing off marble. For a moment, no one breathed, then gasps rippled outward like waves in a pond. Mrs. Bennet's hand hung frozen mid-air, her expression a twisted blend of shock and satisfaction. The slap hadn't been metaphorical this time. A drop of red wine from a nearby guest's glass hit the floor soft, but deafening in the silence that followed. Amara Cole didn't move. Her cheek burned, but her dignity didn't flicker. She simply straightened, slow and deliberate, until her posture towered higher than the chandeliers above them. Someone whispered, "Did she just hit her?" Another voice, trembling, "She actually did." Mrs. Bennet's chest heaved. "I told you to leave. You don't belong in this hall." Amara's gaze lifted not to confront, but to confirm. "And who decides that?" "You're nobody here," the woman hissed. "This is a private event for real investors." "Interesting," Amara murmured, "considering I own most of the company you're celebrating." The crowd shifted. Laughter from the edges faltered. But Mrs. Bennet only heard the challenge, not the truth. "Security!" she barked again. 2 guards hurried closer, uncertainty painted across their faces. They looked from the matriarch to the woman she'd struck, unsure who authority belonged to anymore. And then, as they approached, something in Amara's eyes changed. For a second, the room blurred. The marble vanished. The chandeliers dissolved into fluorescent lights. She was 25 again, standing in a car dealership in Atlanta, wearing her first tailored suit, clutching a folder of contracts she'd saved 3 years to sign. A salesman had taken one look at her skin, her cheap heels, and said, "These vehicles aren't in your range, miss. Maybe the used lot across the street." He'd reached for the paperwork, yanking it from her hands like she was stealing something. She remembered the humiliation the way the other customers pretended not to see. She remembered walking out, not crying, not screaming, just deciding. That night, she promised herself she'd never again explain her worth to anyone. Now, back in the ballroom, her vision sharpened. The same scent, perfume, and pride filled her lungs. The past had come full circle, wrapped in emerald silk. Mrs. Bennet sneered. "What are you waiting for? Remove her." The guards hesitated. Amara's voice sliced clean through the air. "Touch me," she said softly, "and you'll lose your jobs by morning." Something in her tone made them stop. Not anger, not pleading. Authority quiet, absolute, practiced. Mrs. Bennet blinked. "Excuse me?" Amara turned toward her fully, the mark on her cheek now framed by calm defiance. "You wanted a spectacle. Congratulations. You just made one." The journalist's camera caught every second. The room wasn't just watching now, it was recording. Behind the crowd, Alexander Bennet whispered to his father, "We need to stop this. That's Amara Cole, she's the deal." Mr. Bennet's glass slipped from his hand, shattering at his feet. But the matriarch didn't hear. She was still drunk on her own certainty. "You'll regret walking in here uninvited," she spat. Amara's reply was barely louder than breath. "No, you'll regret not recognizing who did." The air trembled. Guests exchanged glances, unsure if they were witnessing collapse or coronation. Then Amara lifted her phone, slow, graceful, inevitable. "Carla," she said, voice steady. "Protocol 6. Those 2 words hit harder than the slap ever could. The pianist stopped playing. The servers froze. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim, as if the building itself was bracing for what came next. Amara's gaze never left the woman who had struck her. "You wanted me gone," she said quietly. "In 60 seconds, your legacy will be." The phone in Amara's hand gleamed under chandelier light, small and sleek, yet in that moment it carried more weight than every investor in the room combined. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move quickly. She simply pressed one finger to her earpiece and spoke with the calm of someone who'd already won. "Carla," she said, her tone steady. "Initiate Protocol 6. Terminate all Bennett contracts immediately. Answer." On the other end, a voice responded without hesitation. "Confirmed, ma'am. Pulling signatures now." To anyone else, it was just a whisper. But to the woman in green standing across from her, it sounded like thunder wrapped in silk. Mrs. Bennett blinked. "What? What did you just say?" Amara didn't answer. She lowered the phone, her expression unreadable, the stillness of a loaded weapon that had already fired. Around them, the murmurs grew. Guests leaned in, their curiosity stronger than their manners. Someone in the back whispered, "She's calling someone. Carla Evans, I think. That's Cole Capital's executive assistant." The realization spread like spilled champagne. "Ma'am," one of the security guards stammered. "Should we?" Amara's gaze flicked toward him, not hostile, but absolute. "No. You've done enough by standing still. Let the truth do the rest." He stepped back instinctively, lowering his radio. Lena Morales, the journalist, was still filming, breath unsteady. Her screen showed Mrs. Bennett's face paling by the second. "Are you recording this?" someone hissed beside her. "Yes," she whispered. "But history's doing the rest." Mrs. Bennett's composure cracked. "You think you can threaten me with your little phone call? We built this company. My husband owes his company to mine," Amara finished gently. "But don't worry, that debt just expired." A few guests gasped. "Mr." Bennett's hand tightened around his glass until it splintered. His voice trembled. "Amara, wait. We can talk about this." She turned her head slightly. "You had your chance to talk when I arrived. Instead, you let your wife speak for you." The orchestra stood frozen, unsure whether to resume or retreat. One violinist lowered her bow, whispering, "Is this real?" "Very real," Amara replied without turning. The assistant's voice came softly through the earpiece again. "All files withdrawn. Press embargo lifted. Should I proceed with the board announcement?" Amara inhaled, slow and deliberate. "Yes, make it public." Mrs. Bennett's lips trembled. "You can't. That deal saves hundreds of jobs. You'll destroy us." Amara looked her in the eye. "You destroyed yourself the moment you thought I needed to be anyone but me." No one dared move. Even the servers froze mid-step. And then, faintly at first, the ballroom's massive digital display flickered. The Bennett Group's logo appeared, followed by a breaking headline streaming live from MarketWatch. Cole Capital terminates $1.5 billion Bennett partnership, effective immediately. Phones buzzed. A collective gasp filled the room. One woman dropped her clutch. Another whispered a prayer. Mrs. Bennett staggered back. "You can't just—" Amara stepped forward once, closing the distance between them. Her voice was quiet enough that only the first few rows heard, but soon, they would all repeat it. "You spent your life confusing money with power. They're not the same thing. Power is silence that changes everything." Lena's camera caught the words perfectly. From somewhere in the corner, Alexander Bennett muttered, "Oh my God, she actually did it." And as Amara turned away, the last echo of her command still lingered in the air, soft, final, unstoppable. Protocol 6 was complete. The empire had shifted. The air in the ballroom had changed texture. It no longer hummed with music or chatter, it trembled. You could feel it in your ribs, like the moment before thunder breaks. Every eye tracked Amara Cole as she stood at the center of the marble floor, backlit by the flickering glow of the giant digital display now cycling through headlines. Cole Capital withdraws $1.5 deal effective immediately. The words burned across the screen, casting cold light over the Bennett family. Mrs. Bennett blinked hard, her voice cracking. "Turn that off." "Who authorized?" Her husband whispered, hollow. "She did." The older woman froze. For the first time all evening, her certainty fractured. She looked at Amara like a mirror that refused to reflect her power back. What are you saying?" she demanded. Amara stepped forward, every inch deliberate. I'm saying you just slapped the woman who was about to save your company from collapse. A collective gasp rippled through the room, audible disbelief mixed with dawning horror. Lena Morales's camera trembled slightly as she zoomed in, her voice barely audible over the whispers. Say it again. Amara obliged, calm, crystalline. You hit your salvation, Mrs. Bennett. You humiliated your own lifeline. Silence devoured the hall. Even the security guards lowered their eyes. Mr. Bennett took one staggering step forward. Amara, please, this can't be final. We can fix this, we can. She cut him off with a small, surgical smile. You already fixed it. You made sure I'll never forget what this partnership truly was. Mrs. Bennett's lips quivered. You're exaggerating. It was a misunderstanding. Amara tilted her head. A misunderstanding doesn't leave fingerprints. Lena's phone caught the tremor in the matriarch's hand. Her pearl bracelet clinked like gilt. A guest whispered, "Is this real?" Another replied, "It's history." The young waiter from earlier stood motionless by the champagne table, eyes glassy. He whispered under his breath, "That's for all of us who had to smile through this." Amara heard him. She didn't turn, but her expression softened for a heartbeat humanity beneath composure. Then she faced the crowd again. "You wanted to know who I was," she said, her voice resonant, yet calm. "Let me help you remember." And she pulled a slim black folder from her clutch and laid it on a nearby table. The gold crest embossed on its cover gleamed under chandelier light. Cole Capital Holdings. I am Amara Cole, founder, CEO, majority stakeholder of the company your family begged for a lifeline. Mrs. Bennett's knees nearly gave out. That's impossible. Her son's voice cracked. Mother, it's true. She's been on Forbes 3 years in a row. Gasps again. Whispers darted like sparks through dry air. One guest muttered, "She owns half the firms that sponsor this gala." Another, "She's the reason the Bennetts still have their yacht." Amara's voice rose just enough to carry. I walked in tonight unannounced to see how partners treat those they don't recognize. Consider the results your performance review. Laughter sharp, disbelieving escaped a few lips, quickly swallowed by awe. Mrs. Bennett stammered, "You set us up." "No," Amara said, shaking her head gently. "I gave you an opportunity to show your character. You showed me your culture." The words struck harder than any slap could. In the corner, the journalist whispered to her recording, "This is the moment." The tables just turned. The lights shifted subtly as if the building itself understood where power now stood. Amara took one more step toward the Bennetts, her voice now quiet enough that the cameras leaned in to catch it. "You thought this night would polish your image," she said. "Instead, it revealed mine." She turned toward the crowd, raising her glass of untouched water. "To appearances," she said, "and how quickly they fade when truth walks in." No applause followed, just the kind of silence that means transformation. Then, from the side, Lena's voice broke the stillness. "Miss Cole, what happens next?" Amara looked straight into the lens. "Accountability," she said. "Public and permanent." End quote. Behind her, the Bennett family stood in ruin not because she shouted, but because she didn't have to. Every whisper, every stare, every camera in that room now belonged to her. And for the first time all night, Amara Cole smiled not as a victor, but as a woman who'd finally reclaimed the narrative. The applause never came, only the quiet hum of realization spreading through the ballroom like an electrical current that had just short-circuited everything false. Mrs. Bennett's smile, once the crown of every social event in Manhattan, had collapsed into a twitch. Her lipstick, perfect moments ago, trembled along the edges as the truth finally caught up to her. "Turn that screen off," she barked again, voice cracking under its own desperation. Someone cut the feed, but no one moved. Not the technicians, not the servers, not the guards. The hierarchy that had ruled this room for decades had just been erased with 2 words: Protocol 6. On the wall behind them, the digital display updated again, market data flickering live. Bennett Group stock plummets 37% in pre-market trading. Mr. Bennett looked at it like it was a tombstone. His phone buzzed non-stop. Board members, journalists, lawyers. He didn't answer a single one. A guest near the bar muttered, She just took them apart in under 10 minutes. Another whispered back, "That's not business. That's judgment." Amara didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply stood where she'd been struck and let silence do what vengeance could never accomplish, restore balance. The journalist, Lena Morales, lowered her phone slowly. "My God," she whispered to herself, "this is what justice looks like when it doesn't ask permission." Mrs. Bennet turned toward her husband, her voice high, sharp. "Say something, Thomas. Fix this." But Thomas Bennet wasn't the titan of legacy tonight. He was just a man watching the empire he'd inherited dissolve into air. "It's over," he murmured, almost to himself. Their son, Alexander, stepped forward. "Miss Cole," he began, voice trembling, "you don't have to destroy everything. My father—" Amara's gaze found him not cruel, just coldly factual. "Your father watched his wife strike a partner in public and said nothing. That silence built your empire. Tonight, it ended it." He looked down, shame softening his arrogance. Lena's camera panned, catching the full tableau. Wealth crumbling in designer clothing, legacy leaking onto marble floors. Guests began to slip away quietly, pretending they needed air, pretending they hadn't clapped for the Bennets just an hour ago. No one wanted to be captured standing on the wrong side of history. The orchestra still hadn't resumed. A violin string snapped under the weight of stillness. Mrs. Bennet's voice fell to a whisper now. "Why are you doing this?" Amara studied her for a long moment. "You thought humiliation was a language only you could speak," she said softly. "I just translated it back." Then she turned toward the nearest server, the young black man who had recognized her earlier. "What's your name?" "Malik, ma'am," he said, startled. "Malik," she replied. "You're the only one in this room who treated me with decency tonight. Tomorrow, you'll get a call from my office. I'm offering you a position at Cole Capital. Triple your salary, full benefits." He blinked. "Are you serious?" "Always," Amara said. Mrs. Bennet's composure cracked entirely. "You're mocking me," she spat. "No," Amara said, turning slightly toward her. "I'm rebuilding the world you broke." From the back of the room, a small ripple began. Not applause, not noise, just people standing taller, straighter, watching her like they'd seen something sacred. A guest whispered, "That's what power looks like when it refuses to yell." Amara glanced once more at the screen where the Bennett logo glitched, fading to black. "End the stream," she told Carla quietly through the earpiece. "They've seen enough." Her assistant's calm voice answered, "Yes, ma'am." Market announcement confirmed. Press release cued. Amara exhaled, then let the silence speak. And it did, long, heavy, undeniable. By the time she turned toward the exit, half the room was already empty. The Bennets stood alone under the chandelier that no longer shone for them. Their kingdom had fallen not by scandal, but by poise. The air that filled the ballroom now was not silence, it was aftermath. The kind that follows a verdict. The kind that tastes like truth finally catching its breath. The chandeliers above flickered once, twice, as if uncertain whether to keep shining. The guests who hadn't already slipped out stood still, transfixed, humbled, unable to decide whether they'd just witnessed justice or ruin. Amara Cole didn't leave right away. She walked slowly toward the center of the marble floor, where the reflection of broken crystal glasses shimmered like constellations beneath her heels. Each step was unhurried, deliberate, the walk of someone who'd carried dignity long enough to know it doesn't need to rush. Behind her, the Bennett family stood in silent collapse, Mr. Bennett clutching his phone, its screen glowing with dozens of missed calls. Alexander, pale, staring at the floor. And Mrs. Bennett, the woman who had struck her, was no longer a monument of arrogance but a portrait of disbelief, her emerald gown trembling with each shallow breath. "Miss Cole," a voice called Lena Morales, the journalist. Her camera still rolled, though her tone had shifted from shock to reverence. "Can I ask one last question?" Amara turned slightly, her expression calm. "Go ahead. What do you want people to take from this moment?" Amara's gaze swept the room over the servers, the guests, the marble pillars that had witnessed too much history and too little humanity. When she spoke, Her voice was low, almost tender, yet it filled every corner of the hall. "I want them to understand," she said, "that silence is not weakness. It's measurement. It's patience, choosing its moment." End quote. The crowd held its breath. "When she slapped me," Amara continued, "she didn't just strike a woman. She struck a lifetime of people told they were lucky to be let in. She struck every quiet yes ma'am, every forced smile, every job interview where someone's last name mattered more than their skill. She struck history." Her tone didn't rise, but the room seemed to vibrate around her words. "I didn't raise my hand," she said. "I raised my standard." It landed like scripture. The pianist, who had been frozen all night, finally lowered his eyes, pressing one key softly, a single note that echoed through the vast chamber like a prayer. Amara walked closer to the Bennetts now, stopping just short of them. "You built an empire on the idea of exclusivity," she said. "But what you call exclusivity, I call fear. Fear of sharing power with anyone who doesn't look like you." Mr. Bennett tried to speak, but his throat refused sound. "I could have destroyed you quietly," she continued, "with lawyers, with numbers, but I wanted you to feel it, the weight of what you thought you could hide behind manners." Mrs. Bennett's eyes welled with tears. "I didn't know who you were." Amara tilted her head slightly. "That's the tragedy," she replied. "You needed to know who I was to treat me with respect." Her voice softened, almost compassionate. "But now you do." Lena lowered her phone. No one was breathing normally. Even the servers stood rooted in place. History doesn't often happen where tips are earned by invisibility. Amara turned again toward the guests who remained. "Some of you watched this unfold and said nothing. Some filmed, some whispered. I don't blame you. That's how power trains people to freeze. But from this moment on, you can't pretend you didn't see it." A murmur spread, faint but restless, the sound of shame transforming into awareness. "You don't change the world by shouting at it," Amara said. "You change it by standing still until the world adjusts its tone." Her words hung there, carved into the air. She looked to Malik, the young waiter, still gripping his tray like a lifeline. "You start tomorrow at Cole Capital. Tell HR I said to expedite the contract." His eyes widened. "Thank you, Miss Cole." "Don't thank me," she said gently. "Just promise you'll treat the next person better than they expect." In 17, a ripple of emotion passed through the staff, a quiet recognition, something between gratitude and disbelief. Finally, Amara turned to Lena, who had tears streaking her cheeks though she hadn't noticed. "You'll post that video?" Lena nodded. "Every second." "Good," Amara said. "Make sure the headline is simple." "What should it say?" Amara smiled faintly. "Power doesn't shout, it cancels quietly." That was her closing line, but not the end. As she moved toward the exit, the massive doors of the ballroom opened automatically, releasing a cool rush of night air. Photographers waiting outside gasped as she stepped into the frame, haloed by the amber glow of the chandeliers behind her. Flashbulbs exploded. Someone shouted, "Miss Cole, any final statement for the press?" She paused on the marble steps, the city lights painting her silhouette in gold. "Yes," she said softly. "Class isn't inherited, it's proven. It's up to en." And with that, she descended the stairs, each step echoing like punctuation marks to the lesson she had just written into the night. Inside, the Bennetts remained where they were, statues of regret, in a room that no longer belonged to them. The digital display behind them faded to black, then flickered once more, showing a single message before it shut down completely. "Deal cancelled. Dignity restored," Lena whispered to her mic, voice trembling with awe. "She didn't just end a partnership," she said. "She rewrote the definition of power." And outside, beneath the night sky, Amara Cole disappeared into a waiting car, not as a victim, not as a CEO, but as a woman who had just reminded the world that justice, when done right, doesn't roar.